Okay, let's begin. We still have some people joining, but that's fine. Good morning and welcome. My name is Asger Mortensen, and I'm heading up the qualitative team at IPSOS in Copenhagen. And in this webinar, we will look closer at different ways to do qualitative research in an online world, or doing digital qualitative work. And that's, of course, a topic that's become much more relevant in the Corona situation. And I'll present together with Rollo McIntyre from our global team. Rollo, you can go ahead and present yourself.
Thank you, Asger. So I'm Rollo McIntyre. I head up innovation for IPSOS UU globally, which is the part of IPSOS that deals with qualitative, and I've been working with Asger for many years. So thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So let's have a look at the agenda for the presentation today. First, I will talk a little bit about the situation that the pandemic has put us in, and what it means for qualitative research and for our room to operate when we do qualitative research. Then we will look at 4 different approaches to doing qualitative research, approaches that have that in common, that they do not require face-to-face encounters with consumers. So they are all different types of digital or virtual approaches. First, Rollo will talk a bit about curation, which is how we use existing knowledge to connect the dots. There's a lot of knowledge and information available to us already that we can harness. Then I will talk to you about mobile immersions, how we can immerse ourselves into the lives of consumers using mobile technology. I'll talk to you about virtual workshops. We do a lot of strategic workshop work. We have done that traditionally. So the objective is how to transfer that into a digital space. And then finally, Rollo will talk about digital interactions. So that is how we interact with consumers in the digital space. And finally, we have a Q&A session. But if you have questions as we go along, feel free to unmute and just jump in if you feel like it, or put your question in the chat box, or your comment in the chat box. We'll keep an eye out for the chat box and address any comments or questions that come up. So just feel free to do that. We prefer an interactive sessions if you have thoughts or comments or questions. Let's have a look at the current situation. It's no secret that the Corona pandemic has been a game changer, especially for qualitative research, because we often rely on meeting consumers face to face, interacting with them, meeting them in their real life context. So of course a lot has changed for us and for the way that we do research. But we also do believe that it's probably more important now than ever to stay close to your consumers, because the Corona pandemic causes such massive shifts in the way that we go about our daily lives, the way that consumers are feeling, the way that their lives are being impacted by the Corona pandemic. So there is this paradox that the pandemic has caused the challenges to do research, but it's on the other hand more important than ever to stay close to your consumers. And what we do see when we do qualitative research is that consumers are even more ready now to share their thoughts and feelings with us because of the situation they are in, and they reflect on their own lives to a greater extent than normally. And they're also now becoming, or they are actually now used to using different interactive tools. So it's a good time for us to do research because the consumers are ready, so to speak. So how do we adjust to this new reality when face-to-face is not possible? So at IPSOS, we've been used to doing thousands of face-to-face interviews every week all over the globe. In fact, 70% of all the qual work that we do traditionally has been face-to-face. But that also means that 30% of the research we've been doing has not been face-to-face, even before Corona. So that's an important point for us to make, is that this transition to digital has already been happening before Corona. So the digital solutions that we are suggesting, it's not just a secondary approach or a plan B that we pull out of the hat because of the situation. It's something that's been going on. We've gradually over the years been increasing the amount of digital work that we do, and we've been refining our suite of solutions. So the transition has been going on.
Yeah, thanks, Asger. So this slide is taken from our global trend survey that we do every year. And I really like the way it talks about the change and the response that happens in the world. So it starts with the macro forces on the left. So these are the big forces that are changing the world, things like climate change and things like that. These have a long-term effect. They in fact change things like trends in society. So these may be things like conscientious eating, where we want to eat things that don't harm the environment. And then the signals, these are local expressions of change that we see in the world, and these tend to be short term. So these are an expression like, a fair trade avocado sandwich or something like that. So all these link together. Now, these work left to right. So the macro forces in turn change the trends, which in turn change signals. But there's also a work backwards, this response. So signals has an effect on trends in society and ultimately on the macro forces as well. Now, normally that takes a long time, you think of things like climate change. Climate change will ultimately kill many more people than COVID, but we don't act in the same way we have over the last 2 months because it's in the future, it's long term. We're not seeing those expressions of signals right now. Whereas what we've seen with COVID, there's been an explosion, a shock to the ecosystem with these signals. So many things have changed over that period of time that it's really made a ripple effect across the world that's affected the trends and affected the macro forces. So it's a really fascinating time to be exploring human behavior. That sounds a bit callous. We don't want to profit from this awful situation, but in terms of behavior, what we see is really, really important. And you'll see from the video that Asger is going to show in a minute about those expressions of local change in the signals. Asger.
Yeah. So what I will show you now is it's a video from ongoing research that we're doing in 6 markets. We call it COVID Watch. So the objective of this is it's a syndicated setup where we work in 6 markets following 5 families during the Corona outbreak. And what's important is that it's filmed only by the consumers. And I think it's a nice example of how you can get very close to the consumer, even though we cannot be with them as we would often be. We can still get very close to them and immerse ourselves into their lives. It's a 3-minute long video that compiles footage from these different families that we have been following. And what I would like you to do is, while you watch the film, please note down any interesting observations that you do, that you make, or any insights, things you think could be potentially interesting from a from business perspective, or could be turned into a business opportunity. It doesn't have to be from your own category. Just things that you notice that are interesting, and then afterwards. We would like you to put these comments in the chat box, and we just have a quick chat about that. I just want to make sure that I have turned on the audio, so I will just quickly stop sharing my screen and share my screen again. Hang on. Here it goes. Okay, so this is the film, and shout out if you have difficulties with the audio. It should be enabled now.
Question number 1. How do you take care of yourself during coronavirus times?
Pressure grows to ease coronavirus lockdowns, but the World Health Organization urges caution.
Make no mistake, we have a long way to go. This virus will be with us for a long time.
Out. 每天反正休回来以后，第一件事情还是常规消毒一下自己。
We're following a YouTube video that we found where we keep half the table dirty, half the table clean.
Where I'm shopping has changed because I was very much a Lidl shopper. So the last two shops have been with Tesco, which have been quite expensive in comparison.
Sto comprando molti saponi, creme, cose per il corpo.
I bought soup. I don't normally buy soup. Bought this instant coffee because we're gonna be trendy and try this coffee we saw on TikTok.
方便面的话，在疫情期间是比较重要的了。最重要的是什么呢？就是说不会做饭的话，冲一包方便面啊，就可以填饱肚子。
I can't get any toilet paper here. I wasn't one to be frantic about toilet paper, but I only have 3 rolls left, so I think I better get some.
Il me reste que ça en papier toilette.
Сейчас самым главным для нас являются витамины. Заказывала витамины на iHerb и, в принципе, всегда заказываю их именно там.
This is a clomazepam. It's a very strong medicine for anxiety.
就是我觉得在疫情期间，每次出去回来以后，吸吸鼻子会比较好。
I will pay only half of my rent for April. I'm really not sure how things are going to look for the coming months.
We're both self-employed. We haven't got, we've not been furloughed. We're not getting 80% of our income just like that.
J'ai aucune confiance dans les banques, donc ça c'est clair, mais ça fait bien longtemps déjà.
Вообще, надежда, естественно, только на себя и на свои силы.
La deuxième semaine du confinement. Et c'est là où les tensions ont commencé à venir un peu au sein du couple en fait.
How many times can you clean? How many times can you do laundry? How many times can you cook chickens?
But seriously, this is one of the ways we get through the day. Some days we have rough times where daddy just throws the kids around the couch for half an hour. Some days we have talk to Lammy.
So this was a visit into the lives of our families around the globe. So I hope you you noticed things, or you picked up on interesting observations and findings. Please share them with us in the chat box. Rollo, can you see the chat box?
Yeah, I can do. So we've got some good ones here from Gita is talking about people get advice from social media. Absolutely, we found lots of that. People are very influenced by what they see, especially their inner network. People are scared and buying more food than usual, and food that will last long. Absolutely, very true. We've seen a lot of different buying habits, especially the kind of tinned products and the products that they will, think this will last me out the whole of the time period. Absolutely. Any other ones we have here? Anyone else got any observations? Anything at all? No right and wrong answers here. There's an interpretation for many of this. Judy's saying people realize that some products are essential to them. Absolutely, yeah. There's some things that people won't be without, and toilet roll is clearly one of them. This is saying people will buy from other stores than they normally go to. They shop at shops that can deliver. Absolutely, yeah. And we definitely have seen different kinds of retail interaction. So, like going from Lidl to Tesco, but also people going the other way, with local products being delivered, all those things that people have never done before. It's the anxiety of the unknown that makes people buy various things that makes them feel more secure. Absolutely, yeah. They're actually becoming more secure through what they do. Camilla talks about focus on health, alternative treatments, absolutely. Ellie's talking about people buy products, immunity products are growing. Yeah, very interesting. Seems that perceptions of personal health is changing. Yeah, people buy products to protect and manage their immune systems, vitamins. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too. Spending more time with kids. Yeah, a lot more of that. People spend more time with their kids and need to entertain them. People go to touch-free payment. Yeah, very, very interesting. Trending on grocery purchases so people can not go out to eat. Yeah. People don't trust authorities. Food are dirty, don't trust banks. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, fantastic comments.
Right, so that's a lot of interesting observations. Good. Okay, so let's move on to the first of the four areas that we will look closer into. The first one is curation. I'll allow you to present, Rollo, so you can take over.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so curation is something that we've been passionate about for a while. So clients have been telling us for some time about, you know, the information obesity that we call infobesity, sort of the kind of avalanche of data, material, things that you have to get through in your day-to-day lives that makes you information rich but knowledge poor. You know, it's almost impossible to keep on top of the massive communication that we have now. Also in our personal lives, you know, there's so much that comes in. How do we balance all that information and turn it into the insights that we need for our day-to-day business? So this is a challenge that we're all under. And, you know, so about three or 4 years ago, we started the IPSOS Center of Curation, specifically around this, because we found that curation, which is the synthesizing of multiple streams of intelligence into one place, through the lens of a business question. This is a real need within the business, but it's also a skill set that you need to train people on. You need people from different backgrounds. We find that people like journalists are excellent at doing this, and storytellers are good at immersing this into their people's world. So, but what we found with COVID, this has been amplified even more. So the influx has become a bombardment, you know. So with so much already available, how can we make sense of it for our brand? You know, it's changing every day. You know, you blink and it's changed. We talk about dog years. You know, every week in a coronavirus has felt like a year. You know, with reduced budgets. You know, so again, that's realistic. For many of us, our budgets are going to be reduced over the coming years, and in the recession that's going to come, how do we make the most of what we already know instead of doing primary research all the time as much as we did? What can we trust? I think this is a really valid point, that the information that we get, you know, it's really important that the sources are from. Do we have the context? Has it been contextualized? And truth comes in many layers, so it's really important to unpeel that truth as well. And clearly, one of the most important things is how can we have the whole organization democratize it more and align around those insights for business questions. So for us, it's like, don't start from zero, you know, don't collect so much, but do more about connecting, bringing those insights to life. What you already have, you have a lot more than you think available at your fingertips. And that's where curation comes in. So the top 4 things that we normally find clients have their need is around know what we know. That's one of the most obvious ones. So, you know, synthesizing what's already there. Discover and contextualize, that's really about what's the context, identifying insights, looking at trends and opportunities. Socializing and embedding, I would say this is the one that's most undervalued within the client organizations, is how do you actually cascade it effectively across your organizations? People have wonderful data, insights, microsites, things that are there, but no one uses them. So our job is to really use the power of storytelling and channels to immerse people within that. And then decoding cultures. We're finding a lot of this recently when we can't perhaps travel all around the world as we did before. How do we decode cultures with our existing knowledge? So a little bit of examples here, some case studies. Know what we know. We do a lot of this, as I say. So what we're currently doing for a healthcare client at the moment on the OTC side is taking everything that they get from COVID, and we give them weekly curated digests, so the COVID digest, and we do this with quite a few clients. This particular one, they basically all their agencies, all the data they get immediately gets sent to us. So we don't even go through the client, and then we curate those into these weekly outputs, and they have a lot of cut through. So we've even had the CEO comment on those, which has been really wonderful to hear. On the personal care side, we do, this is an example of a book of knowledge. So this client was going to do a 5-year innovation roadmap. So we've made this kind of magazine style book of knowledge. It's a lot more easy to read than a typical PowerPoint, and that's really helped them within their challenges. On the beauty side here, this is about discover and contextualize, what's the broader world that's out there. So this was an aging framework for them to understand where can they play most effectively with which targets in innovation. Telecoms, we've done this recently for a big telecoms giant about exploring, understanding the motivation. So this is our Sensidium motivational map. But really, what does that mean when it comes to 5G and what's going to happen with communications? In terms of socialize and embed, this again, we've done a onboarding toolkit for the sales team around. They're mostly like a video-based one that really helps the sales force take action. So, what do I need to know about this specific market? Salespeople tend to have different time priorities than many other people, so they're very time poor. So it's got to be very quick, snippy video snippets that will connect with them. And for this confectionery brand, so this works within their knowledge management system. We work a lot with all the knowledge management systems that are out there, but we can create little mini microsites that really help around a specific target or a particular insight territory as well. The last thing about decoding cultures. So this brand in healthcare we're doing a lot with over the last few years. This is really around helping them understand what cultural levers can be leveraged with their advertising. It's quite complex how the world of health is expressed and communicated in different parts of the world. So we've been doing that for some time. And then for food, this one around segmenting tribes to understand how they're going to reinvent that. So tribes, I think, is really interesting because we talk about culture, nation states, all these things, but tribes can sit outside those paradigms, and it's really interesting to see that generational tribes are much more influenced now than perhaps country ones than there were a few years ago. So to take one of those examples, this last one about decoding culture. So really understanding how we can help brands travel across different cultures. This is especially relevant in the sense that clients don't always have the budget to do research in every single market. So how do we help them, understand how a innovation or a bit of communication might be expressed differently in different parts of the world without oversimplifying things, but making it meaningful. So we do this when we have these questions, the essence of my brand, can I adapt it to other markets or segments? How can I engage different audiences by speaking the language that they do? How do I have a deep and relevant message? And that's really important. When we do cultural transferability, it's not just about, someone looks like this in one market, someone looks like that in another. It's about how does my insight resonate differently across different cultures? How do I align different teams? How do I leverage the nuances of my brand without losing what it stands for? How can we be more efficient in transferring what we do between similar cultures? So we do this because our point of view is that cultural knowledge really empowers brands, from brand positioning to brand exploration to brand communication to brand innovation. Without that cultural knowledge, it's a thin expression of what it could be. So we really believe that cultural knowledge is essential and crucial to that. Now, when we do IPSOS, the cultural transferability, we have a framework that's based on, many of you would have worked with similar ones before. It's based on a Hofstede model, but it's been adapted to what we believe are the most important points for our brands. The core elements here are culture, market, and brand. So we always tend to do those three elements. So that really gives you the culture. It's about the values and beliefs, systems that people have, what are the differences and the similarities that resonate across different cultures. In terms of the market, it's really exploring the category, the dynamics, the competitive environment. What are those needs, motivations, and how are they expressed within that particular market and how the brand could be received. And the brand itself is really exploring the brand territory, the image, the heritage, the equity, the life cycle. You know, they do vary quite differently, the way brands are perceived in different places by different people, by different segments. So it's interesting to look at that. And then we normally have a bolt-on add-on at the end that is some sort of context. So for example, it could be advertising or product style or format. And that really looks about styles of communication that work in different parts of the world with different segments. So, you know, humor, sex appeal, all those things might be different expressed in different parts of the world. And you have to be careful that you get that right, obviously, in the communication. So what does the output look like? So this is one of the things that can be difficult to express at the abstract stage, but we have very concrete deliverables around cultural profiling. So really looking across leveraging our network of, you know, being fluent in 88 cultures. But what it does give you is a comparison of what can be expressed how in different parts of the world, in different segments across the world in terms of that cultural profiling. The inspiration there is these are playbooks that we deliver with our expertise around, you know, how to manage the scope, the boundaries, the do's and don'ts of each of those different cultures as well. And then the activation, this is really important. So either live or virtual workshops to really work out what's the most meaningful brands and how they can co-create the strategy together going forward. So that's what we tend to do as the output. Asger. Asger, I think you might be muted.
Okay, I'm not muted anymore.
No,
but I hear myself an echo, so maybe someone else needs to mute. Okay, sorry about that. Now we're looking into something quite different. Mobile immersions. So we already touched a bit upon that with the COVID watch example, and we'll get back to that. But what is mobile immersions? That is, you know, looking at how we can immerse ourselves into the lives of our consumers, get really close to create that empathy with our consumers that we're looking for. And what we would normally do in a situation like that, we would choose an ethnographic approach, where we would spend time with the people in their homes, or while they do the activity that we want to understand. We want to analyze, you know, not only the behavior but also the culture that it's embedded into, which was also what Rollo touched upon. You know, the importance of understanding the cultural context. But that we cannot do anymore, of course, due to the corona situation. We cannot spend time with consumers as we would normally do. So we thought about what to do then. How can we apply our ethnographic skill set? How can we do this type of work, even though we are now restricted from spending time with our consumers? So what we did was we came up with this idea on how to use our ethnographic approach, or how to transfer it into a form of digital engagement, where we still observe, we still create video, we still work around understanding the culture and do our analysis, but just digitally. And we will use the COVID watch program as an example. It's a good way, it's a good example of the way that we tackle the challenge of the COVID-19. So I'll just explain to you briefly, very hands-on, what we used to do and what we do now in this setup. So what we would normally do before COVID-19, we would spend up to 5 to 7 hours with the participants, filming them. You know, the time spent with them is an important factor in ethnography, because it allows us, you know, to observe them, to see them, to understand them in the real context, and to create this empathy with them that allows us to see the things that they are maybe not even conscious about themselves and are not able to express directly, and to build the trust. But what we do now is we traded this one day for 1 week of interaction with the consumers, just in different ways. What we do is we ask them to send us videos continuously over this time. And we combine that with other methods to make sure that we get the full picture. I'll get back to these other methods later on. we normally would observe them in their home, in their real life context. We still do that. We just ask them to show us different moments and activities with a mobile phone. So they basically use a mobile. It's something that they're used to. It's not something that is new to them. Most people are completely, familiar with documenting their own lives on a mobile phone. We give them tasks to make sure we focus on the things that are relevant for us. What we would normally do is we would create videos. We would film them with specialist cameras and edit these films that highlights the important moments. We cannot do that now. We can edit the film, of course, but we cannot do the filming ourselves. But we teach the participants how to film, so we ensure the quality that way. We can also instruct them on what type of output we're looking for. Is it purely observational, or do we want them to comment or explain to us what is going on? There's different approaches that you could do depending on what you want to understand. In a normal situation, you would you would give something back to the respondents or to the consumers that you're interviewing, and you would of course do that through the conversation that you're having with them. You would show your empathy. You would maybe share some examples from your own life. This way you could create trust, build a connection. We cannot do that right now, of course, but what we can do is we can send back a video to them. So when we receive a film from them, we send back a short video snippet of us, thanking, asking follow-up questions. So it seems like an interaction. They feel that there is someone real at the end of the line, someone that receives and appreciates the things that they are sharing with us. Normally, we would challenge the participants, what they tell about themselves. So when we spend time with them, we can see, the contradictions between what they say and what they do. If there's a mismatch between behavior and attitude, we can still do that actually in this setup. But what we can also do is we can benefit from the extra time that we spend with them or that we interact with them, because it gives time for self-reflection. And self-reflection is something that is already going on with the coronavirus. So it's it has given us a lot of time to self-reflect, and we can benefit from that. So when we receive footage or from them, we can ask them to reflect on that. What does that tell about you? Why do you think that is? Please explain more about this. So it gives us some different opportunities to involve the respondent in the interpretation of what we're seeing. So what we did in this COVID Watch setup, we did all of this mobile immersion or mobile ethnography, and we combined that with 4 other approaches. One is we have academic partners that we work with that help us contextualize the things that the insights that we are generating and putting them into a broader context. We also have a mobile ethnography app that we can use if we want to give the participants specific tasks or challenges. It's a little bit more less observational and more task-based or challenge-based, but that gives a good variation between observation and task-based approach. We do follow-up interview, a more classic face-to-face individual interview, just on a digital platform, just to explore the why behind the behavior, and that's again where the self-reflection can come into play. And then finally, we befriend our participants online, so we can follow what they do on social media. So that gives us another window into their behavior and to what they are seeing on social media. So again, we combine these different sources of data to understand the consumers in their real lives. And I just want to show you a short film, just to give you another example of what you can do with mobile immersion. It's a short clip. It's less than a minute. It doesn't have audio, so there's nothing wrong with the audio when you're looking at it. It's a research that we did for GSK on oral care. It's a global setup. We want to explore the practices within oral care. And I just put on the video and talk over it. So what we did with the client, we analyzed all these little different snippets of video that we received from all over the world, and we created this library or playlist together with the clients. Just pause because I think this is a quite important point. So whenever the client wants to immerse themselves into a certain culture, a certain practice, they can dive right into this playlist of different videos that show consumers in the real life context doing this. I don't know if you noticed while we saw the video, but there were some quite interesting things. Let's say you're working on product development. You could right away see that this man, he does not have access to running water when he brushes his teeth. He does not have a sink. So that's an important point for product development, and you can see the context. So if you're doing comms, there's some very relevant input to design the right context for your communication. Okay, so we move on now to virtual workshops. Are there any questions? Otherwise, we'll get back to the questions in the end. Just unmute and let us know if you have questions or comments.
We had a question from Thomas about how we gather insights on the cultural content. So Thomas, I hope that answers your question, but do type in any more or at the end we can just unmute all the microphones, but hopefully that does. But do keep adding your questions as we go along. Yeah, back to you, Asger.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so now we look at the virtual workshops. So a virtual workshop is basically a workshop, a strategic workshop that takes place in a digital environment. And we will look closer at the differences between face-to-face workshops and virtual workshops, the advantages, and also a few watch-outs. Then we'll give you 8 specific tips on how to do a virtual workshop yourself that you can use right away if you're facilitating a workshop or a collaborative meeting in an online space. This is a bit of unorthodox quote. It's not a specific quote, but it's a feedback that we have received from many clients, several clients everywhere. So to put it. So it's a challenge for many of our clients that they have teams scattered across different locations. So it can be difficult to meet face-to-face. It's expensive to travel. It's difficult to make the calendars work, make ends meet. It can be difficult to coordinate. So can you do anything virtually? That's a question that we have been receiving from clients. And we have actually been doing virtual workshops since before Corona, but of course, the situation has accelerated. Actually, we're now doing 20% more workshops than we did before Corona. So that just goes to show that people want to collaborate, people need to collaborate, and maybe it's even becoming easier once you get used to transforming your workshop work into a digital context. Just a few pros and watch-outs so what characterizes the virtual workshop? So participants would normally do tasks before or between the sessions, and that would make them more accountable for the output. So you would shorten the workshop session and do some of the work as a pre-task or post-task. And doing that makes these participants more accountable for the output because they have produced it up front before the session. It's quicker, it takes less time for the participants, not for those who coordinate, but for the participant because you do shorter sessions. The output is digital, so it's ready to share right away, and it is cheaper because there's no traveling. It's more environmentally friendly if you have global teams. So we did a workshop with a client in Copenhagen where I think 15 people traveled in from the US and different other places across the globe. Of course, that would have been completely different in now. And you will often want to include experts or senior people that have busy calendars, and that can be difficult to make that happen. But if it does not require a full day, it can be easier to make that work. If you look at face-to-face workshop, the relationship building is easier. There are things you can do. Of course, in a virtual workshop, one very practical thing, you can turn on the camera. I know I have not turned on my camera because that can cause some problems with MS Teams. But just turning on the camera is a very simple thing too. But of course, face-to-face workshop, you meet in person, so it has some benefits in terms of relationship building, and it is also easier to make it feel like an event. You can decorate the room and so on. You can also easier digest large amounts of information because you can put post-its on the wall, you can put on the flipboard and so on. So that's a difference too. And you can even create a multi-sensorial experience. You can taste things, you can touch, you can bring props to the session that you cannot do to the same extent in a virtual workshop. A few watch out. You need to prepare or to set aside more time for preparation for these types of sessions. It doesn't require less preparation just because it's in a virtual setting. And it can be difficult to change the direction partway through if something unexpected comes up. It's difficult. So you just need to pay even more attention to your agenda and to the flow of the session. And it can be difficult to assess the engagement. It can be hard to control if people are emailing and so on, but there are things you can do to keep people engaged. But it can be difficult to see that if someone is drifting. And of course, technology can be a challenge if the Wi-Fi drops or the technology acts up. Face-to-face workshops, a lot of pressure being delivered on the day. The diary can be a challenge, and the travel and time cost, we talked about that. And the output is often in a physical written form, so you need to synthesize it and digest it, and then digitize it to share it, so it's not readily to share. So looking at 8 tips on how to run a virtual workshop. Very hands-on things that you can do right away. Just estimate 3 days of preparation for 1 day of delivery. Of course, it's a rule of thumb, but you can underestimate, or you can tend to underestimate the preparation needed to run a virtual workshop. Try to break it down. Often you want to squeeze a lot of activities, a lot of things into a workshop, and that is not ideal for a virtual setting. So try to make shorter and more focused sessions, and then you can split it up and do several sessions if you need to. But try to break it down to keep the engagement high, and then know your tools. Test the technology ahead. Have a person who is responsible for the tech, if that's possible for you while you do the session, so you are not taking it back if something comes up. You can focus on the facilitation, and someone else can handle the technology. And if it's possible, test with the participants ahead. Maximize the together time. Again, that's going back to the post work. Try to, if you can do some of the work already in the post phase, then you can free up time to be together in the session, to do plenary sessions, or to collaborate in the workshop. And then you can also increase the commitment and engagement. If the participant has already been engaged in a pre-task, they will be much more likely to be engaged in the session. Even out interaction, there's a limit to how many people you can interact in a session. We can see that in this call, it's different. If we had all been in the same room, you just raise your hand and ask your question. It works a bit differently. So you would try to make small breakout sessions. 4-person is ideal because everyone can speak. You can make a lot of breakout sessions and then meet again in a plenary session. But you want to have everybody involved. Over communicate. Be very hands-on with be very specific with instructions, timings, because you cannot. It's difficult to see if the instruction is not clearly understood. So if confusion arises, it's difficult to handle. So be very specific on your instructions. And then prioritize, even though that you're making a shorter session, get personal. So take the time to know each other, do a proper introduction, build rapport. Again, use the camera, maybe use some do some energizer exercises to maybe have a quick laugh during the session. So it's important that you do an extra effort to get personal. And then finally, plan for digital from the start. If you think digital first, you can design your exercises to work in a digital context. There are different things you can do differently with the way that you set up the breakout sessions and prepare the templates and the instructions that you give. Okay. We have a case, and I think actually I will skip the case because we are running a bit short on time. I want to make sure that we have time for the last piece, which is the digital interactions. Just skip it, and we can get back to that if you have the time. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to you, Rollo, just for the virtual interactions.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, we've got some questions about the different tech. I'll just touch on that as we go through, actually, because the tech is, unfortunately, it is quite important to get that right. And we're lucky we have a few tech people that help us, but I will give you as much information as I can on that. So in terms of the tech that we do, so the main formats that we tend to do are things like mobile immersions of, either there's different apps that we use or we would use one of the two below. In-depth interviews, dyads, triads, all those things, mini groups, and DX, which is dynamic exchange that I'm going to show you. So basically in the end of March, April, we trained over 1,500 people on using virtual tools. We had to do that really quickly. As Aska said, we had to go from being 60% face-to-face to 0% face-to-face. So we had to get everyone on board on the different things. So my main point about the method is if you're doing IDIs, dyads, mini groups, whatever, still think about why you're doing them and the principles of research. So drip feed them stimulus, don't ask leading questions, use conflict when you need to. All those things still apply in the virtual world, even though that we get very caught up on the process and the channel and the format, but you've still got to think why you're doing this at the end of the day. We tend to use, apart from mobile immersions, that we use a number of different apps for, but generally across the board, we use MS Teams, in fact, for most things now. We do use Adobe Connect. Adobe Connect is quite good in the sense that it's familiar to us. We've used it for quite a long time. It's quite good in the back end. So when you're doing any workshops and things like that, if you want to be a client observer and look at the discussion guide and all those things, some of these tools have better back-end systems for that than others. But in actual fact, we are cheating and doing lots of hacks within Teams now, so that seems to be our favorite ones. But they're all more or less the same now. They're catching up with each other. So if you use Zoom or BlueJeans or any of the other ones, lots of them have the same potential. But as I say, it's really thinking about what you use them for. If you wanted another session specifically on virtual tools, we could do that. Be very happy to do that, and we would get a tech guide to talk you through some of the different elements. So that would, again, something we could do. I'm sure Asger would be very happy to do it at any stage, or I would. I'll give you one example though. So dynamic exchanges is something that we've done, pushed over the last few years to try and break the format of the traditional focus group. So the principle of it is, instead of doing 4 groups separately with the client behind the glass, is we get the client involved in the process itself, and it's more of a co-creation supergroup kind of session where everyone gets involved. The consumers are much more participatory, and it's much more open and transparent. It's a bit more grown up, we find, than traditional behind the glass. Now, how do we do that in the virtual world? Well, we just moved that completely over to the virtual world. The same principles apply to that, but you just do it virtually. I'll be honest with you, it's not without challenges. It takes a ton of preparation, and there's tech issues when you're dealing with consumers that you do need to hold their hand and anticipate problems, and have a lot of backup, because people a minute before they go in won't be able to do it and all that kind of stuff. So you do need quite preparation, and you'll need different roles within the team. So you would have a facilitator, someone to talk to you as a client, and also maybe a producer who's in the background making sure everything flows smoothly. And that's a different kind of model than we would have in doing a normal group or dynamic exchange. So just things to bear in mind there. But you can still do exactly the same thing. And we've done a lot of these over the last couple of months, virtual dynamic exchanges, where your first one is having the breakouts, just like you would have separate tables. Instead, you have separate breakouts on the platform. And you would discuss different things there that might be around innovation. We've done a lot on communication, building big ideas. One breakout might be working on an expression of the insight. Another might be working on how it connects effectively with a brand. And then you go into this consumer debrief stage where they're unloading what they've done. They're actively involved. Clients, you can ask them directly those questions rather than being behind the glass. So that works really, really well. And then the client debrief, we would workshop that with you afterwards. All that's an intensive, packed day, really good experience that you come out of that one session really being on top of what to do next, and having talked to consumers within that. So yeah, I really love this way of doing it. But yeah, the things will go wrong. People won't be able to connect. The connections will go down. All the things that we have been experiencing over the last 2 months will happen during this. But you can get around it. You can get around it, and people are forgiving. In terms of the immersive spectrum, so these are the kind of ways that we will immerse you or ourselves into the consumer world. So this going from the top right-hand side there of true ethnography. These are done by ECEs, Ethnography Center of Excellence. These are anthropologists, right down to Lifehouse, which is a totally gamified bit of theatre, to be honest, that we would do with different research happening in different rooms around that house. Now, we're moving everything digitally because we found out, in fact, you can do everything digitally if you want to. Different challenges, different experiences, you might have different results, but the results will always be interesting. So there's nothing that you can't do apart from things like ethnography that you could do normally. You just have to hack it and think around it and then do that. So consumer dips, taking clients into consumers' worlds, we'll be doing a lot of that. And the programs that empathy programs that we are running for clients that we did face-to-face, we have just switched that into digital. Again, not without challenges. But what you can also do, so you can't do true ethnography. So our anthropologists and ethnographers, they're not going in face-to-face, but they can still analyze the video that they got back through the lens of an anthropologist. And I think that's a really important skill set as well. Give me an example. I'll give you an example here of something that's completely different. So this is what we call InstaBubble. So this is a way of immersing respondents, ad agencies, R&D people into the world around, for example, this one's on health. What is healthy eating and what is unhealthy eating? Unhealthy eating was a lot more interesting, to be honest. And it really allows you to tap into people in their own world. So often in research, we ask respondents to come into our corporate world to do research, where in actual fact, we should be jumping into them. So if you're doing research with Gen Z or with millennials, then this is a great way of doing it. So if tipping into things like Instagram, they know the rules, they know the stories, they know how to make this work. So it's a good way of getting inspiration, not just information. Asger.
Yeah. So the three takeaways that we want you to take from this presentation are three important messages. One is that, of course, now is a good time to understand your consumer, not only from statistics, but understand how they think and feel. And hopefully we've inspired you on different ways to do that, and maybe also convinced you that it's still possible to do research. We have heard back from many clients, doubting, is it possible to do qualitative research now that we cannot do face-to-face? And hopefully we have addressed that concern. We see consumers are adapted to interacting using virtual channels, so they are used to sharing. They're used to going on using Zoom, Teams, any sort of virtual platform, or filming themselves. And there is not much that you cannot do digitally, as long as you design your setup for digital. Sorry. So we believe that face-to-face, of course, face-to-face will come back. It is coming back in some markets, but we believe that it will not be to the same level as before COVID-19. We estimate that 30% of the research in the future will be face-to-face, because COVID-19 has opened our eyes to the possibilities with digital research. So face-to-face could be a more specialized, I wouldn't say premium, but more specialized approach where you would use it just for the research setups where it's absolutely necessary. So those are some important messages that you hopefully take away from this. We have a bit of time left for questions. I know that something came up in the chat box. Maybe we can address that if it hasn't been addressed. But bro, is there other questions that has come up?
Yeah, we've had some comments around. So some people are using Miro. Yep. So Miro is quite a good one. And Mural. Some of them, these are kind of boards where you can co-create with different people, and so different people will add on to that. They're all quite good. I think the secret is to use them within the app. Some of the apps talk to each other well, and some of them don't. So it's a challenge sometimes to integrate something like Mural or Miro into something else like Teams or Zoom. But there's always a hack around if someone knows how to do that. Thomas Gondal is asking, what is your prediction? Will face-to-face disappear as we get more and more used to sharing information virtually? Very interesting question. And that's one of the work streams we're working on at Ipsos, really, is what's the value of face-to-face now? And as Asger said there, that in actual fact, we found out there's lots of things we can do digitally that we thought we couldn't before. For me personally, though, I feel that face-to-face will become even more important. I know that sounds kind of contradictory, but you know how we've really missed the physical connection with our friends, our families, our loved ones, and I think there's an equivalent of that in the research world. I miss actually going to people's homes and being nosy and digging around into things that they don't want me to, rather than what they want to show me. And I miss that. I must admit, I miss some of the physical expressions of what people don't want you to know or do want you to know or not aware that they know. That you can get from face-to-face. And I think there will be a premium value of face-to-face that we forgot why that was so important before. But on the other hand, I do feel that there's so much that we have found in terms of digital. Like, we might do, we've done some ethnographies where people have told us more through the virtual medium than they might have done if we were in their house, and doing a 6-hour ethnography with someone, you would get a certain level of intimacy. But in fact, if you do 6 one-hour sessions virtually, you get more intimacy. So things like that are really interesting to find out. Yeah. So I think now, before we did about 40% of what we did was digital. I personally think we'll go to about 75% what we do will be digital. That would be my rough prediction. Certainly at Ipsos, that's what we're aiming for. Asger, I don't know what you would add to that, but your predictions on the role of face-to-face and will it disappear?
No, I completely agree with you. I don't think it will disappear, but I think we will use it in a more focused way. So we will use it when it's necessary for the objective for our objective. So it will not be necessarily be the default setting. You just do face-to-face because that's what you always do. I don't think that will be the case anymore. I think we'll do face-to-face when we think that this is actually the right thing for us to do for this specific purpose.
Exactly.
So we move away from the default choice and to a more informed decision, if you could put it that way.
We've got some more questions. Do you have any experience with digital for markets in Africa, Asia? Yeah. So I would say Asia's probably been the most traditional in face-to-face. So they have been the most reluctant to go to digital. But actual fact, we've got Asian clients now who have now they've experienced it, have been over the moon. And so we've had a big shift. But again, we already see the pattern that some clients in Asia, especially from the more traditional client base or traditional markets, they want to go back to face-to-face fairly quickly. In Africa, it depends. Sub-Saharan Africa, we do a lot of mobile research anyway, because they tend to do, everyone's very mobile savvy, they do their banking on mobile and things like that. So there's much more has been mobile enabled before anyway. So that's not been such an issue, but yeah, we have had that before. We have one more from Tom. Any cost savings in going digital? I'm afraid not. We were hoping that as well, but it doesn't. In actual fact, lots of cases, digital can be a bit more expensive because you've got more people involved. I would say across the board, it's flat. It's not going to be much different doing things digitally. There are cases when for sure it is, you know, especially around immersions and things like that. But it's not the ones that we were hoping to pass on to you, no, I'm afraid. Good. I think we've run out of time, Asger.
Yeah, I think so too. Is there any final questions? Just a final one, or are we through?
I think we're through all the questions there. Yeah, we're finished.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining the call. I hope that you you know, like us, you know, believe that we can do qual even though we are in this strange situation, and hope that we inspired you a little bit on how you could do that. If questions come up after, just let me know or let us know, and we'll address it. And if we'll share the presentation with you afterwards. Yeah, so you'll hear from us later today.
Good. Thank you very much
for today. Thank you, Rollo, and thank you
everyone. Thank you.